Following the successful completion of the first-class mage's exam, Frieren has achieved the necessary first-class rank to venture into the Northern Plateau. Here, they cross paths with a diverse array of characters and face off against a range of never-before-seen monsters. Embark on a thrilling journey with Frieren's party as they head towards Oriole, located at the northernmost tip of the continent. Tune in to explore the exciting adventures that unfold in this unexplored territory. Nearly 3 decades since the fall of the famed hero Himmel, Frieren and her allies journey through the Somme marshes. On a brisk morning, Stark returns to the group with freshly caught fish, which Frieren adeptly adds to their morning meal. Meanwhile, Frieren is preoccupied with something amidst the bushes. Stark comments on Frieren's unusually early rise, to which Frieren responds that a particular interest has roused her. Frieren soon appears holding a large, strikingly beautiful crystal. Frieren struggles to use her fire magic for cooking, leading Frieren to explain that the crystal has the unique ability to suppress magic. To prove her point, Frieren instructs Stark to distance himself from the crystal, enabling Frieren to successfully cast her magic. Frieren then shares an intriguing fact. The crystal is a rarity, with even a tiny piece worth several gold coins. The large specimen they've found could fetch a price high enough to purchase a lavish, exotic mansion. Frieren is concerned that keeping the crystal might endanger their expedition, as it disables the use of magic by her and Frieren. She strongly advises Frieren to get rid of the crystal, highlighting the potential peril and monster encounters due to its magic-suppressing properties. Despite Frieren's apprehensions, Frieren remains composed and unveils yet another remarkable characteristic of the crystal. She demonstrates its capacity to hold large amounts of mana, which causes it to emit a powerful glow. While Stark is taken aback by its bright radiance, Frieren, still skeptical of its usefulness, continues to insist that Frieren should part with the crystal. Continuing their journey to the next village, which they anticipate reaching by day's end, Frieren notes a part of the marsh still illuminated by the crystal's light. Stark inquires with Frieren about how close they are to the northern plateau. Frieren responds that there's still a considerable distance ahead, including a journey through a large forest and across a volcanic belt. Frieren eases Stark's concerns about the volcanic region, mentioning that it hasn't erupted in many years and now serves as a peaceful hot spring area. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted when the ground beneath them gives way, sending them flying into the air, with Frieren managing to catch Stark. They find themselves above a cavern, brimming with crystals that negate magic. The interruption of their flight spell leads to Frieren and Frieren falling, ending up landing on Stark, who is beneath them. Frieren takes a moment to assess their surroundings, impressed by the sheer size of the crystal or deposit they've stumbled upon. While soothing a clearly unsettled Stark with some reassuring head pats, Frieren comments on the cave's composition, which seems to be made entirely out of the magic-inhibiting crystal. Stark muses about the potential wealth they could acquire by harvesting these crystals. Yet, Frieren clarifies that these crystals are renowned for being the hardest material in existence, impervious to any physical or magical alteration. She adds that extracting crystals of such monumental proportions is beyond human capability. As they start looking for a way out, Frieren boosts Stark's morale, reminding him that they're relying on him now. She points out that due to the crystals, both she and Frieren are now just ordinary girls, and humorously remembers Stark's earlier comment about her being a hack. The scene shifts to a quick montage of the group making their way through the crystal-filled cave, eventually setting up their campsite beside a body of water. Frieren expresses her concern to Stark about the immense size of the cave and the possibility of it harboring a large monster, a suggestion previously made by the now soundly sleeping Frieren. She shares her fears with Stark about not being able to detect mana, contrasting her apprehension with Frieren's relaxed attitude. Frieren equates the impact of the magic-blocking crystals to being cast into total darkness, which further unnerves her. As Stark is about to respond, a dragon suddenly appears from the water. Stark acts swiftly, grabbing Frieren to brace for the dragon's imminent attack. Upon waking, Frieren identifies the beast as the venomous apex dragon, an extremely dangerous adversary for Stark. Overcome with uncertainty, Stark confronts Frieren about her earlier calm attitude. Frieren swiftly assures him that she has put her trust in Stark, noting that such confidence has been a given since he became part of their team, which is vital for their group's survival. Stark, however, voices his insecurities, seeing himself as someone who panics and runs away when things get tough, acknowledging his current desire to flee. Frieren, offering a comforting smile, suggests that they both retreat together. She then tells Stark to close his eyes and throws a mana-infused crystal fragment at the dragon. This smart move temporarily blinds the dragon, tipping the scales in their favor. The scene transitions to a brief flashback, showing the hero party gathered in a dungeon. Aizen, puzzled, questions Himmel about his willingness to entrust his life to someone like Aizen, who had left his own village. Himmel responds, explaining that if Aizen ever feels the need to flee, they will all flee together, because they are, after all, a team. In the next part of the flashback, the hero party is depicted escaping from a dragon. In this moment, Hyder is seen carrying Aizen, while Himmel is carrying Frieren. Back in the present, this scene is paralleled by Frieren's party, where Stark is seen running, holding both Frieren and Fern, mirroring the earlier escape of the hero party. Having successfully navigated their way out of the cave, Frieren comments on the frightening nature of their ordeal, noting that there's no shame in retreating from battles as a group, a sentiment Stark agrees with. Just as Frieren and Fern get ready to continue their journey, Stark admits that his legs have failed him, leaving him unable to walk any further. The scene shifts to Frieren's party in the Great Sanft Forest. Stark, coming back to their campsite with a basket full of ingredients for lunch, ponders if his selection is adequate. He looks around and notices that Fern and Frieren are nowhere to be seen, leading him to think he has returned sooner than anticipated. Deciding to make the most of his time, Stark sets off to go fishing, hoping to bring back a substantial catch. Elsewhere, beside a river, Frieren and Fern are seated together, with Fern tenderly washing Frieren's hair. Frieren comments on the chilliness of the river water, to which Fern responds by suggesting she bear it until they reach the next hot spring. As Fern meticulously cleans a bracelet, Frieren recognizes it as the mirrored lotus bracelet Stark had given her. Fern, with a smile, remarks that she has also cleaned the hair ornament gifted to her by Frieren. Observing Fern, Frieren notes her apparent happiness in taking care of these items, as evidenced by the smile on her face. Fern shares that she finds pleasure in treasuring gifts, particularly since she lost everything, including her hometown, in a war. Frieren feels reassured that her choice of the ornament was meaningful, and Fern notes that selecting it must have been a puzzling task for Frieren. Fern's insight into Frieren's thoughts surprises her. At that moment, Stark arrives, leading Frieren to teasingly call him a pervert. Once they are dressed, Fern sets about tying Frieren's hair while Stark, on his knees, apologizes, clarifying that he was unaware they were bathing. As Fern finishes with Frieren's hair, she reassures Stark that she wasn't really upset with him. However, as their journey resumes, Stark is noticeably downcast, and Fern remains quiet. Frieren points out to Stark that the mood has become rather somber, and Stark is somewhat touched that Frieren has noticed. Frieren then suggests that Fern and Stark might not be the best match, as there seems to be occasional tension between them, but Stark doesn't agree. Frieren, feeling responsible, reminds Stark that she was the one who brought him into the party and encourages him to speak up if he ever feels uncomfortable with the group. But before Stark can reply, they reach a crossroads, with one path leading to the northern plateau and the other to the neutral harbor. Upon noticing an inn located right at the junction, Stark and the rest of the party decide to go inside. As they enter the lively inn, they quickly spot Werble, Scharf, and Air seated at a table. Werble comments on the unexpectedly swift reunion with Frieren and then warmly greets Stark, thanking him again for his help with the Fresserlion boar. Werble shares that he's hurrying back by sea due to the resurgence of demonic activity in the northern frontier. He mentions that he'll be traveling with Scharf and Air until they reach the port town near the royal capital. Air playfully brings up Werble's tendency to get seasick, prompting Stark to jest that Werble is getting on in years. Werble defends himself, insisting that he's only recently left his 20s behind and isn't old yet. Stark recalls that Sane would often make similar claims. Werble revisits a previous proposition with Stark, seeking his thoughts on the matter. Curious, Frieren prompts Werble for more details. He shares that the war in the north is struggling, largely due to a lack of soldiers on the front line. He suggests that Stark could join his forces for a few years, perhaps 2 to 3, to help bring stability to the situation, emphasizing that it's Stark's decision to make. Stark reiterates his dedication as a key member of Frierin's party. Nonetheless, Werbel, showing steadfast resolve to safeguard the North, declares his willingness to do whatever it takes for this cause. He asks for Frierin's permission to further try to convince Stark, which she gives before Frieren gets a chance to comment. Observing Stark's engagement with Werbel's group, Frieren reflects on Stark's apparent enjoyment of the conversation and starts to question whether their own party has been too constraining for him. In the evening, Stark is seen relaxing on the inn's veranda, soon joined by Frieren. He quickly informs Frieren that he has declined Werbel's proposition. Frieren, seeking clarity, asks Stark about his level of confidence in his decision. Stark emphatically confirms his dedication to Frierin's group. He reflects on his past, a time filled with despair and his attempts to escape everything, which changed after meeting Frieren and Frieren. Stark perceives his decision to join their party as one shaped by Frierin's support and his own renewed desire to embark on journeys. He subtly suggests that Frieren, perhaps without realizing it, has been instrumental in his progress so far and commits to staying with the group. In a lighter moment, he jokingly requests Frieren to treat him more gently. Frieren responds positively, inviting Stark for some soothing comfort. Stark is taken aback by her proposition, leaving him puzzled about her motives, while Frieren internally comments on Stark's challenging nature. On the following day, as Werbel, and Sharf prepare to part ways with Frierin's group, they share their goodbyes. Werbel voices his regret at not being able to convince Stark to join him, but quickly dismisses his disappointment, confident that Frierin's party will make their way to the northern frontier sooner or later. With a smile, Frieren signals to Stark and Frieren that it's time for them to set off on their journey again. In Fable Village, we find Frierin's party approached by an elderly local who requests their help in cleaning a statue of a famous hero in the village. Frieren, intrigued by what they might gain in return, asks about the reward. The elder offers a spell that alleviates the discomfort of an itchy back, which quickly persuades Frieren to accept the request. On their way to the statue, Frieren observes the ubiquitous presence of Hero Himmel's statues, while Stark suggests that such detailed tasks can be quite satisfying. Preparing to start work, Stark shows his eagerness, but Frieren mentions that if the statue were bronze, they could use magic to polish it, making Stark's manual labor unnecessary. When they arrive at the statue, Stark is taken aback to see it's a depiction of a middle-aged man with a mustache. Frieren introduces this figure as the hero of the South, assuming it's the first time Frieren and Stark have heard of him. She goes on to explain that, like Hero Himmel, numerous heroes challenged the Demon King, but the hero of the South was notably the strongest among them. Although Stark thinks the title is a bit exaggerated, Frieren believes it is fitting for the hero of the South. Frieren then shares a bit of history about the 7 Sages of Destruction, who were a significant threat in various key areas, especially in the northern countries. She reveals that the hero party only managed to defeat 2 of these sages, with another 2 escaping, while the hero of the South successfully conquered the remaining 3. Frieren further explains that the hero of the South's achievements against the demon army were extraordinary. He managed to obliterate the army's frontline forces all by himself within just 1 year. His campaign led him to the northernmost point of the Northern Plateau, a strategic location vital to the army's supply chain. According to legend, it was here that the omniscient Schlacht, a confidant of the Demon King blessed with the foresight of 1,000 years, faced off against the hero of the South. This confrontation also included the 7 Sages of Destruction. Despite the seemingly insurmountable odds, the hero of the South succeeded in defeating 3 of the sages and entered into a direct confrontation with Schlacht. While Frieren shares more details, the group notices a puppet theater in the village narrating the same tale to a group of children. Frieren mentions that the hero of the South's battle led to the liberation of many areas from the 7 Sages' dominion. She comments on the deep belief held by the people in the hero, so much so that many think he is still battling Schlacht, as his body was never recovered. Frieren expresses her conviction that despite facing demons known for their cannibalistic tendencies, the hero of the South would not have been easily overcome or devoured. Frieren starts to clean the statue with a smile, triggering a flashback to her past interaction with the hero of the South. In that memory, Frieren turned down his request for assistance, stating her belief that she couldn't defeat the Demon King. The hero of the South, accepting her decision, felt he had no words that could change the mind of the elf. Frieren observed that he seemed to know the future outcome, which the hero confirmed. He confided in Frieren that his strength as the mightiest among humans came from his ability to see into the future. He trusted her with this secret, believing she would never reveal his ability. The hero foresaw his own end within a year in a confrontation with the omniscient Schlacht and the 7 sages on the northern plateau. He admitted that his fate was sealed, regardless of Frieren's help, and he had accepted that he wouldn't vanquish the Demon King. He then made another prophecy to Frieren, predicting she would join the group of a young hero destined to save the world. Frieren was skeptical of this, finding it hard to believe. As he was leaving, the hero of the South made a profound statement, asserting that this young hero would greatly influence Frieren's life. He then asked a favor of Frieren, which she agreed to. His wish was for her to tell the young hero that the hero of the South, the strongest human, would pave the way for him, even if his deeds were lost to history. The flashback concludes as Himmel, Heider, and Eisen arrive to join Frieren. Frieren completes the task of cleaning the statue of the hero of the South, leaving it gleaming. In return, the elderly villager presents Frieren with the spell she was promised. The villagers express their gratitude for the statue's renewed appearance. Watching their appreciation, Frieren contemplates the hero of the South's earlier prediction, which didn't quite hold true. Contrary to his belief that he would fade into obscurity, he has clearly made a lasting impression, evident in the fond remembrance of him by the villagers. The setting changes to Frieren's party in the realm of Graf Dock. Stark remarks on the rarity of their visits to big towns. In an unusual manner, Frieren states that they'll be departing shortly after restocking their supplies. Stark spots a magic shop, but Frieren, disinterested, reminds him of their limited time. Fern senses that something is amiss, and Stark points out that it's atypical for Frieren, who normally prefers to stay for a few months upon arriving in a large town. Recognizing Frieren, a butler approaches the party and invites them to an evening banquet hosted by Graf Dock. Frieren tries to decline, citing their plans to leave, but the butler persists, explaining that Graf Dock wishes to extend his hospitality as a token of gratitude for Frieren's contributions in the hero party that once saved his domain. That night, at the banquet with Graf Dock, Fern notices Frieren's hesitant demeanor as she thanks Graf Dock for his invitation, while Stark is thoroughly enjoying the meal. Graf Dock expresses his gratitude to Frieren for the aid she provided during the time of his great-grandfather. Frieren, cutting to the chase, inquires about Graf Dock's intentions. Pleased with her directness, Graf Dock reveals that a demon has stolen the family's ancestral sword. Frieren informs Stark that a similar event had occurred in the era of Graf Dock's great-grandfather, leading Stark to comment on the frequent thefts of the sword. Agreeing to help, Frieren requests a grimoire in exchange for their services, a condition that Graf Dock accepts. On their way to track down the demon, a frustrated Frieren shares that of all the forceful nobles in the northern region, the Graf of this domain has always been particularly demanding. She recalls how the hero party was once threatened with imprisonment if they didn't retrieve the stolen heirloom. Frieren adds that there were no clues to the sword's location, but the hero party eventually found it atop the Schwer Mountains. When Fern questions why demons frequently target the sword, Frieren clarifies that it has a unique allure for demons, originally belonging to a prominent demon. Fern comments on Frieren's decision to accept the task despite these complications. Frieren responds that they have no choice but to undertake the request, as refusing would negate Himmel's past efforts, and Himmel himself would never abandon such a task. The narrative then shifts to a series of scenes showing Frieren's party on their journey, including moments of travel and camping. Upon arriving at a desolate village, the party comes across a woman shrouded in a cloak. Frieren inquires if she is a local, but the woman reveals herself as a wandering priest, there to mourn the village's destruction by the sword demon. Frieren suspects this demon is the one they're searching for. The cloaked woman guides them to a burial site, sharing that the sword demon has wreaked havoc in numerous villages. She invites the party to join her in prayer, but Frieren disrupts the solemn moment by casting a spell at a grave, exposing its emptiness, leaving Fern bewildered. Frieren deduces that the lack of bodies signifies the woman is actually the sword demon. The demon unveils itself, brandishing a sword, and justifies the villagers' slaughter as necessary for its survival. Frieren counters, arguing that the demon has no need to prey on humans. A confrontation erupts between the party and the sword demon, culminating in Frieren quickly vanquishing the demon using her powerful spell, Zoltrak. A flashback begins to when the hero party first found the sword on top of the Schwer Mountains. Frieren comments on the cold and the dreadful nature of their task, but Himmel views it differently, seeing the challenging request as an opportunity to defeat a demon and save numerous lives. He asserts his commitment to helping those in need. Heider, however, just that Himmel simply enjoys taking on tough tasks, a notion Himmel doesn't refute. Back in the present, Frieren's party is shown paying their respects at the burial sites. Later, in Graf Doc's domain, Graf Doc thanks Frieren for retrieving the family's treasured sword. As the party prepares to leave the town, Frieren notes their acquisition of a valuable grimoire. Fern senses Frieren's satisfaction, while Stark inquires about the grimoire's contents. Frieren reveals it contains magic to change red apples to green, a fact Stark deems rather trivial. Shortly thereafter, Frieren's party arrives in the Etwas Mountains. Stark comments on the rising temperature, to which Frieren explains that they are in a volcanic belt, a region in the northern countries known for its warmth. Fern excitedly concludes that they might soon enjoy a hot spring, and Frieren confirms this, adding that they are close to a village with hot springs. As they continue their trek, Stark queries about the proximity of the village. Frieren expresses some uncertainty, believing they should be near the village. Eventually, they come across a lone cabin, which unsettles Frieren. While Stark engages with children at the cabin, an elderly local shares with Frieren a nostalgic revelation. The village they seek has been abandoned for 30 years, and its hot springs have long since dried up. Stark questions the travel time to the next village, and Frieren estimates it will be about a week. Curious about other hot springs, Stark listens as the elder recounts a tale from 30 years ago, passed down from his grandfather, about a hidden hot spring in the distant mountains. Frieren recognizes this as the elusive hot spring of the Etwas Mountains. She expresses doubt about its current existence, considering its deep mountain location, and suggests that heading to the next town would lead them to a hot spring more quickly. After pondering for a moment, Stark expresses his curiosity about the legendary hot spring and suggests they try to find it. Initially, Frieren dismisses the idea as too much effort. However, Stark persists, arguing that since they're already in the area, they might as well explore. Eventually, Frieren, with a smile, gives in to Stark's enthusiasm and agrees to set out from the cabin in search of the mysterious hot spring. A montage of scenes followed, illustrating the journey of Frieren's party. They are shown traveling through various landscapes, setting up camp, and engaging in a skirmish with a boar. During these episodes, Fern notices that Frieren doesn't seem particularly excited about the quest for the secret hot spring. Frieren then shares that the hero party had once extensively roamed the Etwas Mountains in search of this hot spring, driven by Himmel's insistence on thoroughly exploring every unique location. Just as Frieren mentions the monster-infested path to the hot spring, the group is suddenly confronted by a formidable three-headed dragon, leading to a fierce confrontation. Following this intense encounter, Fern acknowledges the exhausting nature of their journey, but they finally reach the much-anticipated secret hot spring. However, Frieren remarks that they would have been better off heading to the next town. To Stark and Fern's disappointment, they discover that the hot spring is quite shallow, barely deep enough for a foot bath, prompting Frieren to reiterate her initial reluctance. Stark, with a grin, reassures everyone that the small size of the hot spring is okay, as they can all fit in for a foot soak together, a notion Frieren agrees with. As they relax with their feet in the hot water, Fern admires the scenic beauty surrounding them and questions Stark about his insistence on visiting this particular hot spring. Stark shares that his knowledge of the place came from Eisen. A flashback then reveals a young Stark listening to Eisen reminisce about his own visit to the secret hot spring, which he found amusingly inadequate for anything more than a foot bath. Despite considering it a seemingly pointless endeavor, Eisen reflected that it was a unique and memorable experience, emphasizing that it's often the seemingly trivial adventures with friends that create the most lasting memories. Back in the present, Stark echoes Eisen's sentiments. However, when the party finally starts their journey back, they are all exhausted, disheveled, and in agreement with Fern and Stark's conclusion that, practically speaking, the venture wasn't really worth the trouble after all. Moving on, Frieren's party finds themselves in the northern lands, specifically within the fortified city of Heiss. While relaxing in the inn they're staying at, Fern, absorbed in her book, has a conversation with Stark. She points out Frieren's habitual visits to the local hot springs since their arrival. Stark adds that Frieren's daily routine seems to alternate between the hot springs and a magic shop. Fern notes they will be in the city for another 2 days and agrees with Stark that Frieren has been quite disciplined, humorously attributing this to her own firm handling. She also mentions their free schedule for the next day. Upon hearing this, Stark thinks about getting his axe sharpened at a weapon shop. Fern chides Stark for not including her in his plans. In response, Stark mischievously asks Fern out on a date. Fern, maintaining her composure, is visibly taken aback, dropping her book. Apprehensive about her reaction, recalling a past incident, Stark is pleasantly surprised when Fern calmly agrees to the date and leaves, saying they'll meet the next day. This unexpected turn of events leaves Stark bewildered and unsure. Stark, anxious that Fern might be upset, shares the entire sequence of events with Frieren during a meal, seeking her insight. Frieren, somewhat incredulous, questions Stark's judgment and reminds him of whom he's consulting for romantic advice. Stark acknowledges the improbability of his request. However, Frieren, undaunted, assures him that she can offer guidance, claiming to understand a young woman's heart. Desperate for advice, Stark turns to Frieren. When he inquires about her reaction if he were to ask her on a date, Frieren confidently responds that, as an adult, she'd be glad to treat him to a meal. Stark quickly realizes Frieren's perspective is not helpful, likening her more to a doting grandmother than a romantic advisor. Frieren, a bit sternly, warns Stark that this is the second time he's made such a comparison and that there won't be a third. Stark, growing nervous, inquires about the consequences of a third offense. Frieren jests that she would resort to crying and throwing a tantrum, so fearsome that even Himmel was intimidated by it, referring to an incident Hyder mentioned that supposedly lasted 3 days. Returning to the matter at hand, Frieren acknowledges Stark's lack of sensitivity, a trait already known to her. Stark confides that he couldn't back out from his invitation to Fern and had initially hoped to ask Frieren for suggestions on places Fern might enjoy. Though Stark considers it his responsibility to find a location, Frieren offers help with a smile, saying she might know a few spots Fern would appreciate. She proceeds to show Stark various locations, eventually leading him to a high vantage point overlooking the city. Frieren suggests that a tranquil, open space could be a good choice. Stark is impressed by Frieren's insight into Fern's likes, but Frieren admits that it was Hyder who informed her about all of Fern's preferences. She reflects that Hyder likely intended for her to play a parental role for Fern and confesses her initial struggles to find things that Fern would enjoy. Stark reassures Frieren that she's been an effective parent, remembering these details despite her earlier challenges. Pleased by Stark's compliment, Frieren playfully reduces the count of his earlier offense to 1, leaving Stark both grateful and somewhat puzzled. The following morning, Fern seeks Frieren's opinion on which of 2 outfits to wear. Frieren, groggy and half asleep, dismissively remarks that both outfits look similar and asks Fern to braid her hair before heading out. Fern, slightly irritated, braids Frieren's hair a bit more forcefully than usual. After this, Fern and Stark set off on their date. Meanwhile, Frieren, back in the hot springs, receives compliments from an elderly lady on her neatly braided hair. During their date, Stark observes that Fern is dressed differently than her usual attire and asks about it. Fern reminds him that she chose the outfit specifically for their date. As they stroll together, Stark internally ponders if Fern has always been as charming as she seems now. He quickly dismisses these thoughts and awkwardly suggests they keep walking. Fern notices Stark's tense behavior but doesn't comment as he tries to act nonchalant. Fern inquires about their plans, and Stark suggests they explore a market close by, a place Fern recalls Frieren visiting often. Stark mentions that such markets typically feature rare magical items, illustrated through flashbacks of Frieren demonstrating a spell and Fern stumbling upon an assortment of odd items at their inn. Fern humorously remembers how Frieren once dozed off beneath a similar collection of items. Stark expresses a bit of wariness about Frieren's deep interest in these oddities, a sentiment echoed by Fern. The story then shifts to show Fern and Stark casually wandering through the market, pausing at a jewelry stand. Fern notices a promotion offering a discount for couples on necklaces, prompting Stark to jokingly note the cost-effectiveness of dating. While looking over the merchandise, Stark observes that the items seem pretty ordinary, leading Frieren to comment that it would indeed be unusual if they were all enchanted. Stark then suggests they take advantage of their time and explore more of the town, an activity they rarely indulge in. The story continues with another montage showcasing Stark and Frieren enjoying various activities around the city. They savor snacks, share a meal, and visit a statue of hero Himmel, eventually arriving at the high vantage point Frieren had recommended to Stark. As they gaze out over the city, Frieren comments on the ubiquity of hero Himmel statues in every city. Stark shares that Frieren once mentioned there are over 100 different poses for Himmel statues, leading Frieren to half-jokingly suggest they might have overdone it. As Frieren takes in the tranquil beauty of the scenery, Stark, observing her, wonders aloud if she's not really enjoying the date. Frieren assures him she is, but Stark points out that she hasn't smiled at all throughout the day. Frieren admits that while he took her to places she would enjoy, it didn't feel like the choices were personal to Stark, especially since it was an opportunity for them to have a date together. Stark apologizes, admitting he relied on Frieren to select the spots. Surprised, Frieren queries further, and Stark confesses his intention was to make her happy on their first date. Despite her initial disappointment, Frieren expresses her gratitude, touched by Stark's consideration and effort to ensure her happiness. Resting on a bench, Frieren comments on the serenity of their surroundings, noting how, as someone who grew up as a war orphan, she never expected to experience such calm moments. Stark shares her sentiment. They both acknowledge their gratitude towards their adoptive parents, Hyder and Eisen, for this newfound sense of peace. The story then transitions into a flashback, where a young Stark is seen at the dinner table with Eisen preparing food. Stark curiously asks Eisen why he chose to adopt him, to which Eisen simply states he did what Hero Himmel would have done. The flashback fades, focusing once more on Himmel's statue. Later, Frieren and Frieren are at the bathhouse. Noticing Frieren's cheerful demeanor, Frieren inquires if something pleasant occurred. Frieren, with a continued smile, casually replies that nothing much happened. As Frieren's party leaves the city to resume their travels, Stark points out that Frieren's hair is braided again. Frieren cheerfully refers to them as her good mood braids, leaving Stark puzzled as he tries to discern the difference. As they press forward in their travels, Frieren's party finds themselves in the Nakricht region. Stark observes the drop in temperature, and Frieren explains that they have moved beyond the volcanic area and are now nearing the northern plateau's border. Before crossing the checkpoint, they take the opportunity to replenish their supplies. Frieren displays her suitcase, which surprisingly holds more items than its size suggests. The group quickly clears the border checkpoint, thanks to Frieren's status as a first-class mage. Entering the northern plateau, Stark remarks that the area seems rather ordinary, despite its reputation for danger. Frieren questions the seriousness of his observation. However, Frieren soon alerts them that they are already encircled by monsters and urges them to get ready for combat. A series of scenes follows, showing the party engaging in various monster battles. Eventually, at night, they sight a village. Frieren, feeling relieved after 3 days of constant vigilance, expresses her hope for some rest. Stark, overwhelmed by the continuous fighting, half-jokingly admits he thought he might die in battle. Upon their arrival, a local villager presents the party with an available cabin to stay in, but he has a request for them in return. He recounts the troubles caused by a powerful monster up the road, which has not only defeated the chivalric order but also discouraged merchants from traveling the route. Since adventurers seldom visit their village, he hopes that Frieren's party might be capable of dealing with the creature. Frieren agrees to take on the task, as their journey leads them in that direction, but first confirms with Frieren and Stark if they're okay with it. Both agree to the plan. However, Stark questions the logic of the villagers choosing to live in such perilous conditions, wondering why they don't simply relocate southwards, away from the northern plateau. The villager acknowledges the danger inherent in their location, but emphasizes the deep connection they have with their birthplace. Gazing at his family, he expresses the significance of their land, steeped in family memories, and ponders how one could leave their hometown behind. Stark is visibly moved by the villagers' heartfelt sentiments, eliciting a subtle smile from Frieren. At dawn, the party sets out to face the monster, finding it occupying the center of the road, sword at the ready. Frieren instructs Frieren and Stark to stay alert, and the confrontation begins. Stark initially engages the monster, keeping it occupied while Fern and Frieren prepare to unleash their Zoltrak spell. Once the monster is defeated and its body disintegrates into dust, Stark rests against a tree, pondering over the creature's formidable strength. Frieren points out that this is just the beginning of their journey through the Northern Plateau, warning that they'll encounter many more monsters of similar might. Fern agrees, noting the challenging path ahead. Stark, feeling disheartened, questions Frieren whether they should have opted for sea travel instead, considering the difficult adversaries they're facing, suggesting that the extra expense might have been justified. In a brief flashback, the hero party is seen having just vanquished a monster. Eisen expresses his surprise at the monster's unexpected strength, while Hyder voices his concern about the potential danger to his life. In a sentiment similar to Stark's, Frieren suggests they should have chosen sea travel, knowing the risk involved in their current route. Himmel counters this, emphasizing their presence is crucial precisely because of the danger, as many people in the Northern Plateau need protection. He elaborates on his motivation for becoming a hero, which extends beyond safeguarding his homeland to protecting others as well. As the flashback concludes, Frieren, drawing from that memory, reminds Stark that many people consider the Northern Plateau their home, underscoring the importance of their mission. Stark acknowledges this with a smile, and Fern encourages them to give their best effort. As Frieren and Fern start to move on, they notice Stark still seated. He explains that his knees have given out, prompting Fern to jokingly call him pathetic. As the party navigates through a town in the beer region of the Northern Plateau, Stark expresses his surprise at finding a town in such a location, while Fern notices an abundance of bars. Frieren clarifies that the area hosts the only granary on the Northern Plateau, making brewing a long-standing and thriving business here. The scene shifts to the party dining at a bar, where Stark overhears a conversation about someone named Fass, who is reportedly close to discovering Bahaft. Another person in the bar expresses skepticism, mentioning that this search has been ongoing since his childhood. Curious, Stark inquires about Bahaft, leading Fern to share what she learned from Hyder. It's reputed to be the finest spirit in the world, once distributed by a great emperor of the continent long ago. Fern playfully remarks that Hyder blamed Frieren for missing out on the chance to taste this exceptional spirit. Frieren responds, hinting at certain complications that prevented them from trying Bahaft. Upon exiting the bar, Frieren mentions her intention not to linger in the area for long. Suddenly, a dwarf spots Frieren and excitedly approaches her. Recognizing him as Fass, Frieren corrects his assumption that it's been a century since their last encounter, stating it's been only 80 years. Fass comments on Frieren's unusual preciseness regarding time. He then notices Stark and Fern, new companions of Frieren, and inquires if the drunk, Hyder, is still with her. Frieren solemnly informs him of Hyder's peaceful passing, prompting Fass to express regret for being too late. Fass reveals that he has finally located the Bahaft and seeks Frieren's magical assistance. Puzzled, Frieren questions what Bahaft has to do with magic. Fass, eager to show them, insists they follow him. Leading the way to a mine, Fass boasts that he excavated it himself, a skill he had to learn as he grew up in a town, not a traditional dwarven mining environment. His sole motivation for mining was his passion for finding the finest spirit, the Bahaft. Stark, seeking clarification, turns to Frieren, who explains Fass's unparalleled dedication to alcohol, having spent over 2 centuries searching for Bahaft. She recalls how the hero party once had to turn down Fass's request, leading to an image of a tearful Hyder being pulled away by Himmel. Fern, curious, asks Fass why he needed to dig a mine for his quest. Fass shares a legend claiming that Bahaft was buried nearby and recounts his decision to believe in this legend after discovering a stone monument 2 centuries ago. Fern, recognizing the script on the stone monument, identifies it as Ancient Elvish. She reads that it extols Bahaft as the world's finest spirit, with the inscription penned by Milliard. Fass is impressed by Fern's ability to read such a language at her age. She explains that Frieren made her learn Ancient Elvish when she was younger, given that half of the world's grimoires are written in it. Frieren, examining the monument, confirms that it was indeed the work of Milliard. Fass recounts how his quest started with this monument and that he's now tantalizingly close to finding Bahaft. Upon hearing Fass's claim of finding the ruins, Frieren follows him to a door sealed with a formidable barrier spell, with Fass hoping Frieren can break it. Frieren assesses the spell and declares breaking it impossible, to Fass's disbelief. She reasons that the process would be too lengthy and both Fern and Stark dislike waiting. Fass insists, offering compensation, prompting Frieren to inquire if it would be in grimoires. Instead, he proposes 20 Reich gold coins for the task, which Frieren immediately refuses. Despite Fass's passionate plea, highlighting his 2 centuries of dedication, Frieren remains unmoved. Fern and Stark, however, begin to persuade Frieren, pointing out the substantial value of the reward and its potential to cover their extensive travel and food expenses. Frieren calculates that dispelling the barrier could take 2 to 3 months, but Fern and Stark are undeterred, arguing that the time investment is trivial. Stark formally agrees to Fass's offer, much to Friren's dismay. In the months that follow, a series of scenes is shown. Frieren is seen diligently working on the barrier spell, interspersed with moments of the party sharing drinks and camaraderie with Fass. This montage culminates on the eve of the barrier's expected dispelling. Fern notes Frieren's lack of enthusiasm, which Frieren confirms, expressing her belief that Bosshaft is overrated and not worthy of a lifetime's pursuit. When Fern brings up the monument's inscription, Frieren reflects that some elves engage in extraordinary activities simply to alleviate boredom and pass time. This reflection leads into a flashback featuring a young Frieren and an elf named Milliard, who seems disengaged and distant. Frieren questions whether Milliard spends all her time in such a state. Milliard responds by asking if Frieren understands why elves often dedicate their lives to a singular pursuit, explaining it's to avoid ending up aimless like her. Milliard then poses a rhetorical question about the futility of devoting one's life to a worthless cause. Frieren, curious, asked for clarification. Milliard, drinking from a bottle, reveals it's Bosshaft, a drink used in coronation ceremonies despite being a low-quality beverage. She shares that before coming to the village, she whimsically inscribed praises of Bosshaft's greatness. When Frieren inquires about her motivation, Milliard responds that there was none, highlighting the pointlessness of her action. As the flashback concludes, Frieren successfully dispels the barrier encasing the door. The door swings open to reveal a room filled with bottles of Bosshaft. Fass is delighted to see the bottles are well preserved and can hardly believe the long-awaited day has arrived. He hands a bottle of Bosshaft to each member of the party, Frieren, Fern, and Stark, and proposes a toast. Fass takes the first sip, and his reaction is one of unexpected surprise. The scene then shifts to another flashback, this time of the hero party leaving the town. Himmel inquires why Frieren didn't partake in the search for Bosshaft. Frieren turns the question to Hyder, asking if he enjoys alcohol. Hyder enthusiastically confirms, which seems to surprise Himmel. Frieren then poses a hypothetical to Hyder. What if the drink he had sought his entire life turned out to be unpalatable? Hyder ponders this for a moment before stating he would simply laugh it off and share the moment with his companions, finding joy in the shared experience regardless of the drink's taste. The flashback concludes with Fass struggling to articulate his thoughts about Bosshaft. Frieren, however, doesn't hesitate to express her opinion, bluntly stating that it's horrendous, arguably the worst alcoholic beverage she's ever tasted. She notices Stark hasn't tried it yet, likely due to their reactions, and urges him to take a sip. Stark, upon tasting it, can't help but cry out at its unpleasant flavor, but this shared experience leads to laughter among the group. Fass, after another contemplative moment, finds humor in the situation. He suggests that there's enough Bosshaft to share with the entire village, turning the disappointment into a communal celebration. The scene shifts to show Fass and the party, now joined by the villagers, all partaking in the Bosshaft. Despite the drink's letdown, Fass jovially remarks that it's the most enjoyable evening he's ever had. As the party prepares to leave the town, Fass shares a final thought, emphasizing the importance of making the most out of a drink, especially when shared in good company, turning even a disappointing experience into a memorable and joyful occasion. 3 decades after the passing of the hero Himmel, Frieren's party finds themselves in the territory of the Norm Company. While camping, the group settles down for a meal. Fern hands Stark a piece of bread that makes a distinct clunking noise as it lands on his plate. Stark comments that food shouldn't sound like that, and Fern observes that they've been eating nothing but hard bread for a week. Frieren, chewing on her own bread, advises them not to have high expectations, explaining that the northern region is mostly barren, with the exception of the beer region. She notes the lack of supply distribution in the area, indicating that their diet of hard bread is likely to continue, much to Stark's dismay. However, Frieren offers a glimmer of hope, suggesting they might find better food about half a day's walk away. As they resume their journey, the party soon comes upon a fortified town, leaving Stark impressed. Frieren informs them that the land belongs to the Norm Company, which also houses its headquarters in the town. She elaborates that the company is an armed force with the resources and network to distribute supplies across the northern plateau from the beer region. Due to this capability, the Norm Company is regarded as the unofficial ruler of the northern plateau, surpassing the influence of any nation. Fern, recalling Frieren's earlier comment about the absence of supply distribution, is reminded by Frieren that much can change over time, implying that the company's power might not be what it once was. Nonetheless, Frieren cautions Fern and Stark to avoid any trouble, emphasizing the company's enduring influence regardless of their current strength. Upon arriving in the town, the party is initially allowed entry. However, the receptionist, recognizing Frieren from a book, asks them to wait, leaving Fern puzzled. Soon after, they are ushered into the presence of Lord Norm, the current head of the company. Lord Norm acknowledges Frieren as the mage from the hero party and demands the repayment of a debt she incurred 80 years prior. Fern, surprised, inquires if Frieren actually owes a debt. Frieren reminds Norm that she had been given the option to repay the debt at any time, but Norm refutes this, pointing out that no such clause is mentioned in his documentation. He advises Frieren against depending on verbal agreements, indicating that unlike his ancestor, he is not lenient. Frieren presents the party's available funds, which include 3 straw gold coins, 20 right gold coins, and some silver and copper coins. This amount impresses Norm, as it compares to the wealth of a noble, which Frieren notes with satisfaction. She confidently tells Norm that his great predecessor greatly aided the hero party, suggesting he can consider the excess as a token of gratitude. After a brief consideration, Norm declares that the offered sum is significantly insufficient to settle the debt. In the next scene, Frieren is dressed in a miner's outfit, equipped with a pickaxe. She informs Fern and Stark that she has been sentenced to 300 years of labor in the mines, effectively ending her journey with them. Fern is visibly confused, and a dejected Frieren explains that all her possessions have been seized as collateral for her debt. As she bids a sorrowful farewell, 2 miners escort her away, leaving Fern and Stark in a state of bewilderment. Stark, unsure of their next step, turns to Fern, who concludes that their only option is to somehow buy Frieren's freedom back. During a conversation with Norm, he insists that there's nothing they can do and hands Fern a document. The document shockingly reveals that Frieren's debt, with accrued interest, now totals over 500 straw gold coins, or more than 300 right gold coins. Later that night in the mines, Frieren complains about the heat and dust as she works. A group of miners approaches her, mentioning they were sent by the president. Frieren, with a smile, uses her magic to mark a specific location and shows it to one of the miners. The miner, uncertain, seeks confirmation from Frieren, who confidently reminds him of her identity. Trusting her guidance, the miner instructs his team to start digging towards the location indicated by Frieren's spell. The scene transitions to a flashback just before the current events, where Norm and Frieren are conversing in the mines. Frieren reflects on the legacy of Norm's great predecessor, describing him as a heroic figure who invested in the desolate northern plateau to establish a comprehensive distribution network. She remarks that this same man generously financed the hero party without any immediate expectations or set repayment date. Expressing her disappointment, Frieren contrasts this magnanimity with the current Norm's treatment of her. However, she acknowledges with a smile that Norm must have had a significant reason to personally visit the mines. Norm then shares with Frieren the critical situation regarding supply distribution across the plateau. He explains that the company has recently lost 30% of its armed forces and caravans due to a resurgence in demonic activities, severely impacting their distribution network. He muses that if the company were a country, it would have likely collapsed under such circumstances. But as a business entity, he emphasizes the importance of capital, asserting that with adequate financial resources, they can rebuild the network as often as necessary. Norm elaborates that Frieren's unexpected arrival felt like a divine intervention, giving newfound value to the promissory note he held. He reveals that the mine they are currently developing has shown potential for silver ore, which could yield substantial profits. Such profits, he believes, could be significant enough to offset the hero party's debt, a task he assumes Frieren could easily accomplish. Frieren then grasps the true motive behind Norm's actions as he formally requests her assistance in rebuilding the Norm Company's distribution network, which would benefit the people of the Northern Plateau. In return, he suggests that Frieren might even enjoy soft bread in the farthest reaches of the plateau. Frieren, acknowledging Norm's cunning as a merchant, agrees to help, intending to repay the generosity of his great predecessor. The flashback concludes with the miners striking a significant vein of silver ore, much to Frieren's satisfaction. The following morning, now in possession of all her belongings, Frieren informs Fern and Stark that it's time to depart. Stark breathes a sigh of relief, sharing that they were contemplating ways to rescue her, including Fern's plan to launch a nighttime assault on the mines. Frieren, taken aback by Fern's boldness, smirks at their concern. She assures them that, thanks to their efforts in the mine, they can look forward to enjoying soft bread during their travels henceforth. And that's the end of the video. Please like and subscribe.